Movie Crusaders, and welcome to my latest episode. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and today I'm going to be doing a duo review for two horror films that have just come out in the last week or two. We're talking about Barbarian and Pearl. First, we're going to talk about Barbarian. This was a movie that I saw the trailer for. I didn't really know what the movie was really about. I probably was not going to check it out, but there was a very, very strong word of mouth and positive energy coming around this film, basically saying that this is a must-watch horror film. So I went out of my way to check this movie out just to see what the whole fuss was about. Barbarian is basically the story of a woman staying at an Airbnb that discovers that her house that she has rented is not what it seems. We basically are following the story of Tess, played by Georgina Campbell, and she basically goes to her Airbnb at night and realizes that there is another man already staying who was double booked for the same Airbnb as she was. That played by Bill Skarsgård, aka Pennywise from the It franchise, and his name's Keith. And basically, it's kind of about them kind of, not spending the night together, not sexually, but just basically kind of agreeing to, hey, we both, it's raining, there's no one else, there's no other available places to go, let's just stay here and be done with it. And as they're there, they start to find out that the basement is a lot more than it seems, and there's like open tunnels and all this kind of stuff, and that's where kind of the craziness basically happens in this film. We're also introduced to another character by the name of AJ, played by a guy that I love, in Justin Long. He's a movie/TV star who's going through a certain situation in the film that causes him to also go to the Airbnb that he actually owns, which is where Tess and Keith are staying, and he gets brought into the situation as well. The way this film is shot, it is kind of shot almost kind of like in a three-parter, which either works or doesn't work depending on the person. There are movies that do this kind of in parts thing, and it works masterfully, and then there are times where this just doesn't work together very well. For me, I am more on the latter. I think the first 30 minutes of this film, where it's just Tess and Keith basically talking, getting to know each other, their performances are fine. It's just, it does go on a little too long because we're constantly playing this, Tess doesn't trust Keith, Keith probably could be a rapist or a serial killer or whatever, Keith's kind of awkward, he seems like he's a generally good guy, but she still doesn't trust him, and then she finally kind of, starts to trust him a little bit, but then something happens and she loses that trust again, and it's just, they're just going around the horn, which I get it. Most horror films, if you watch them, they're very by the numbers. The first 40 minutes is character development, depending on how good the actual dialogue of the film is, and then around the 40 to 50 minute mark is kind of when all the chaotic or first kills all happen in the film, and then after the 50 minute marks, you're setting up the final act of a horror film. If you don't believe me, watch any horror film that's at least an hour and a half to an hour 40 minutes long. Check your clocks, trust me. So the first 40 minutes of this film does move rather slowly because you're basically having this back and forth between Tess and Keith. It's not very exciting. It's not very much anything fun to watch. But then when we inevitably finally do get to this flip of the coin of this underground tunnel in the basement, as soon as we get something super interesting happening, they cut, and then they go to AJ's story, and then it's another 10 to 15, almost 20 minutes of story about him just kind of doing his thing, which, it's Justin Long. He can make it entertaining, and I'm actually surprised that Justin Long, for some reason, has really gotten into this almost typecast of playing like these characters that seem kind of quirky and funny and enjoyable, and then they just kind of be sleazebags. And he's done this a little bit now, and I'm kind of wondering if he's being typecast into these roles. But once again, we stop the momentum that we had gotten so far in the film with Tess and Keith and completely divert to a whole new story with AJ, and it takes another 20 minutes just to get to that point. And then once we get to that point, we go into another part of the story with another character. This one more of a flashback kind of thing. Not nearly as long as the setup for AJ, Tess, and Keith, but it, once again, stops the film right when it's about to get interesting to set up something, and then we inevitably get the last 20, 30 minutes of the film where it's basically kind of going through stuff. I'm not going to explain what it is, because the best way to go into this is to not know that much about what's actually going on in the tunnels. But even what we do get in that story, is it shocking? Yes. Is it kind of a twist and turn? Yes. Is there some stomach-churning moments in it? Yes. But ultimately for me, by the end of the film, was I blown away by Barbarian? No. Did I love this movie? No. Did I like it? It was fine. Bottom line is, I think it was literally the structure of the story, how it was told, and them basically stopping, starting a new story, catching up to this story, and then going here, that inevitably for me is what hurts the film overall, because all the momentum that you were building up, and you finally get to this crescendo part where we're about to get some serious stuff happening, and then it cuts away and it goes to another character, and we're missing all this development that we have with Tess and Keith, that by the time the AJ character catches up to where they're at in the story, we've missed a good chunk of what's going on with their story, and then we're just kind of thrown into the mix here. And to me, I feel like that hurts the story overall, especially for like the Tess and Keith characters, because we're missing some crucial horror in this story, and I just ultimately doesn't work for me. I think performances-wise, everyone's great in the film. I think the horror elements, when actually being shown, are done really, really well. It was the story and how the story was developed and how it did, A to B to C is what ultimately hurts this film overall. I also think the third flashback story, I praised this on Woman King where it was like show, don't tell. This one really probably could have been told instead of wasting, 5 to 10 minutes of screen time showing me a flashback that really didn't need to be shown. They probably could have explained this and boom, we would have had the same thing, but we would have stayed with these characters and developed more with Tess, Keith, and AJ than having to stop, pause, show this character, and then bring them back, and then go from A to B. And that, to me, like I said, is kind of, to me, what kind of hurts Barbarian in a nutshell. So for me, overall, do I recommend Barbarian? If you want to see a horror movie in theaters right now, I'd probably say go check out Pearl. But if you didn't like X, you're probably not going to like Pearl. So Barbarian's really the only option you've got at this point. So if you want to watch a horror movie, sorry, got the hiccups, before, Halloween hits, Barbarian would be a solid film to watch. I don't think it's worth a movie ticket. I think if it was on streaming or gets put on VOD relatively quick, then sure, check it out. But I wouldn't spend like $20 to watch this movie. I don't think it's as good as everyone's making it out to be, because everyone's, I think, really blowing this movie out to being this phenomenally great film. And I think it's just average at best. For me, I'm going to give Barbarian a 63%. It's a movie that I probably will never watch again. And it's definitely not a movie I would necessarily recommend. But if you want to check it out, check it out. But I'm not going to say go out of your way to check this movie out. Going now into Pearl, this is a weird dynamic. And I don't necessarily hate the dynamic, but for anyone who saw the film X, which I think was in March or February, which anyone who knows the movie, it is a horror film that about takes place in like 1979. It's a group of young filmmakers that basically rent out a barn and try to shoot a porno in rural Texas, and then they are basically attacked by the elderly couple who live on that farm, and we are introduced to a character by the name of Pearl. Pearl is played by Maya Goth, who also plays a character in X as well. So she does a dual role. She plays the young woman in X. The character's name is Maxine, but then she also plays Pearl in old woman makeup. And now, after the events of that film, we get Pearl. Basically a few months later, which takes place in, I believe it's 1918, and we are introduced to a young Pearl, once again played by Maya Goth, and basically this film is the backstory to explain how Pearl became the woman that we saw in X, besides being just an old woman, but why she is the way she is. If you loved X, and you really, really loved the performance of Mia Goth in that film, Mia, if you really loved her performance in X, you're obviously going to check out Pearl because you want to continue the story. You want to see where the story plays out. If you are not a fan of X, I don't really see any reason for you to go and check Pearl out because this is very much a 100% Maya Goth role. She's, I believe, on screen 100% of the time. If you like her performance or you like her as a performer, you're probably going to like Pearl because you're going to get plenty of her in this film. In terms of the actual plot of Pearl, I mean, she basically lives on the farm. She's married to Howard, who we know from X, but he's off in World War I, so she's living on the farm with her overbearing mother, Ruth, played by Tandy Wright, and her her father, who's basically on a wheelchair, can't communicate, all that kind of stuff, played by Matthew Sutherland. I don't think they even give him a name in the movie. I think it's just father in the film. And it's basically about how she deals with her life with her overbearing mom who constantly berates her and talks down to her, and how she aspires to be this dancing performer / actress so she could, get away from the farm. And that's all she wants to do is get away and be somebody. But Pearl, much like in X, is a little different. She's a little on the weird side. She has a pleasure of killing. Now, in Pearl, she's just killing animals. Literally, the opening scene is her killing a poor defenseless goose who was just coming to say hi. But you're starting to see it's very much almost like a Norman Batesy type performance for Mia Goth here as Pearl. And I don't say that in a bad way because Maya Goth, and I know I keep saying Maya and Mia, Goth, or I'm just going to call her Pearl. Pearl in this film, she's great in this movie. Maya Goth is fantastic as Pearl. She kind of almost has like this, if anyone who's seen Popeye, she's very much like an Olive Oyl type of character. She's sweet, soft-spoken, southern, tries to be as pleasant and as disarming as she can possibly be to everybody. She just wants to be loved and liked and all this kind of stuff, and she wants to be a star. But you see this facade, like she wants to be that, but behind her is the real Pearl that we know from X. And you're seeing this mask that she's constantly putting on for everyone slowly starting to crack and break as the film goes on until we inevitably get full-fledged on Pearl in this movie. And that's when we get kind of the remnants of what we saw in X. Problem is that there's really not a whole lot going on in the movie outside of watching Maya Goth put on this great performance. Tandy Wright as her mother Ruth, she's solid in her role. There's also David Corenswet. He plays the projectionist. I actually liked his performance. I thought he was really solid as a person who that Pearl meets when she's in town one day and basically kind of tries to give her some motivation and like pumps up her self-esteem a little bit. You also have Misty, played by Emma Jenkins Perot. She is Howard's sister, who's kind of Pearl's friend. She pops in and out here and there as kind of like the rich friend who gets everything she wants, and Pearl's kind of her poor friend kind of situation. But ultimately, it's all about Pearl and her inevitable snapping point to she becomes the person that we see in X. And like I said, the movie itself, there's not really a whole lot going on. You're just kind of watching Pearl go through her life over the course of, I think it's like a week, and watching, like I said, the facade that she has inevitably break and her basically become this character that we know from the previous film. And like I said, Goth does a phenomenal job at doing this. There is a monologue that she pulls off at the end of the film. It's like a 5-minute long monologue, but she destroys this monologue. When I mean destroys, I mean like, I was at first like, okay, I get it, but then as she just kept going and going, and you're just enthralled by her performance, you're just like, damn, she is killing this monologue. And she does a fantastic job. I didn't really care for her performance in X, but I really, really enjoyed her performance in Pearl. And she also has this smile that is, it's so big and fake and creepy that it's almost like when you see a movie where you're trying to tell a person who doesn't smile to smile, and they do a big, weird, creepy smile. You're like, okay, don't do that. That's her regular smile in this movie, and it is unsettling. And the end of the movie, they do the smile, and it says like the end, and the whole credits is her. It's not a freeze frame. It's her literally continuing the smile for a very long time. It looks painful watching her try to smile like this for so long, and it's just creepiness to the max. But like I said, outside of her performance as Pearl, there's not really a whole lot going on. The horror excitements that we got in X is not really there in Pearl, and you're basically just watching this more as like a character study of the performance of Maya Goth as Pearl, and less about the enjoyment or the excitingness of a film like you got with X. So in terms of recommendations of this film, I think X is the more entertaining, fun film, but Pearl is the better Maya Goth performance. So they go hand in hand. I feel like they're a 1-2 punch. You really can't see one without the other. I mean, you can, but you're missing some good character development out of it. There is a big character development part that does go missing in this film, and that is definitely the husband Howard, because we see where Howard is in X, but we never see how he develops from Pearl to X, because he kind of just shows up late in the film. But it's something that I wish they could have given at least another 5-10 more minutes of screen time to, just so we know where Howard is compared to where we see him in the previous film. Like I said, nonetheless, if you're a fan of Maya Goth, you're going to check out Pearl. She's fantastic. I wouldn't say she's Oscar performance good, but she's getting there. And Pearl is definitely a movie that showcases her acting abilities throughout. There's just not much else to watch besides that. So if you're a huge fan of X and her performance in X, you're going to go out of your way to see Pearl. It's not going to be as exciting as X, but I think you guys will think it's a solid film overall. If you're not a fan of her performance or you're not a fan of X, don't check out Pearl. You're probably going to find it boring. It's probably not going to win you over into liking X more. You might like her as an actress more, but I don't think it's going to really dissuade you from thinking that X is a good film that you didn't think so previously. So for me, I'm going to give Pearl a 72%. So like I said, between two horror films, between Barbarian and Pearl, performance-wise, I would pick Pearl. Horror-wise, I guess I would pick Barbarian, even though I wasn't really a fan of it. So you're kind of that's kind of is what it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. On the channel right now, I have a review for The Woman King. And then we will also be having a Movie Crusaders chat about where Brian and I will be talking about sister/twin movies. And that I'm not talking about actual sisters and twins. Watch the episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then next week, or in the next week, we'll also be having our end of summer review and fall preview for all the movies that are coming out for the rest of 2022, and we'll have our most anticipated and talk about those films on there. And of course, at the end of the month, we will be having the Movie Crusaders Halloween special, where we will be talking about all these scary movies that we recommend for you guys to watch all throughout October, as well as reviews for all the other movies that come out through the rest of the month. So we got plenty of videos to drop on the channel, so feel free to check those all out. And until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.